So I was suggested a video by my friend Nervardia, and it's called "This Is How I Escaped the Cult of Wokeness." Now, it's from a creator who I'm not familiar with, so I'm going into this completely blind, but the creator is someone named Kimi Katiti. So, I've not touched this video. I don't know what I'm in for. But if you guys know what I'm in for, then I guess we'll see. But before we get into all that, a couple of things. One, if you haven't subscribed already and also followed over on Twitch, now's probably a good time to do that. Secondly, let's go ahead and get to the fan art section before we get any further into madness territory. So first we have I Duped Too Hard from JacandQuil. Then we have a Toy Box Suris from Adam Derpington. Apparently this is a reskin of my character, and says if I end up on some battle pass, I'm breaking your kneecaps. I wholly expect this version of my character to end up on, like, Paladins or something someday. And then finally, we have a fully colored piece from Blue Cat Shadow. As always, everyone, thank you all for your fan art submissions. And let's go ahead and get right into This Is How I Escaped the Cult of Wokeness. This will be interesting.
Alright, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. But let's get right into it. This is actually how I escaped wokeness.
Okay, so is it escaped wokeness as in you changed your paradigm? Or am I supposed to take the actual name of the video in context where you escaped the cult of wokeness? I'm not sure which one. Because I'm wondering what the cult structure is. Secondly, Dark Fallen Savior, thank you very much for the follow.
I became a woke zombie for a while. And it was very much so due to college, just like every other story you hear.
I became a woke zombie, and it was because I went to college. Just like every other story you hear? I don't really know how... what I'm supposed to parse from that. This feels almost anti-intellectual. I know that's a thing that PragerU likes to push a lot. Like, colleges are liberal indoctrination centers. Also, Ganon, not from Zelda, thank you very much for the follow.
I'm very grateful to be out of that cult.
Cult.
And this is kind of my journey.
You know what a cult is?
Into how I got into that, and how I kind of got out, and how you can also test to see if you're in the cult of wokeness. Because
okay, so I agree that there's certainly merit to testing if you're in a cult, but I'm fairly certain that this cult of wokeness is not going to pass the bite model.
Because the reason I say cult is to denote that it is bad for you. Like,
I say cult to denote that it's bad for you, despite the fact that we have, like, a decent academic understanding of what a cult is. Like, okay, cool. Let me just go ahead and use this exact same argumentation. I escaped the cult of Laffy Taffy because Laffy Taffy was bad for you. Yeah, no. Cult does not just mean bad. There are certain connotations to that word.
Like, it is bad for your health, your relationships, for your future, your country, for your neighborhood, for your cat, your dog.
Is bad for your cat and dog? All right, let me go tell Growlithe. Growlithe, did you know that the cult of woke will destroy your food bowl?
Spider in the corner for everyone. I don't know how to say this, so I want to describe what it feels like if someone doesn't really understand it. I know there are people who, they've just been like anti-woke from the beginning. I don't know how someone can actually be anti-woke from like the beginning, because that's kind of, I hate to use the word, that's kind of problematic. Like, you were not woke at any point in time. So hopefully everyone watching this at a point kind of had a drip of like wokeness, because I think people go into it with good intention.
Could you define wokeness? You're a minute and 21 seconds in, and you keep on saying wokeness, but I feel like you might need to actually define it so we know what we're talking about.
And that's the whole trick about it, is the well-meaning folks who get sucked into this thing that has so much attached to it in a very Trojan horse-like fashion. So I hope that there are some people who were like, you know, I mean well, I do want to end racism, or I didn't like what I saw with the George Floyd thing, so I do want to do a little bit of work to make sure that I'm fighting against any systemic oppression that exists and that sort of thing. This video and these videos aren't to appease those types of people. Like, I don't think that's good. With that said...
Wait, you don't think that's good? Wait, what do you think is not good? So I know I don't do anything scripted, but I feel like this highlights the benefit of using a script.
There's a different thing going on right now. Our current mode of like social justice, there's something amiss about it. And I'm here to say, like, I fell for that wave for a little bit, but it doesn't yield the sort of liberation that you would think it would yield.
Okay, so how would it yield the sort of liberation you think it would yield or not if these are terms that you haven't defined yet? What in your estimation is an SJW? What in your estimation is wokeness? For me to have a preconceived notion about liberation with either of these concepts, I need to have a definition. I need to know what these things are. It's like calling somebody a fascist but not having a working definition of fascist. If you don't have one, don't fucking use it.
Now, a little bit of background about myself. I spent my high school years in South Africa, and during the time in South Africa, I learned a lot about Nelson Mandela. I was in school in South Africa through the late 2000s, and it was still healing, so there was a lot of discussion about race. They had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but not only that, they just adopted a framework that aids forgiveness. And people think I make this stuff up. Literally, Desmond Tutu has written 2 books, as far as I know, 2 books on forgiveness. Desmond Tutu was out there protesting, like getting arrested, getting tear gassed. His daughter and his wife were strip searched in a very disrespectful manner by the apartheid police force. Archbishop Desmond Tutu wasn't allowed to vote, even though he was a notable, respected archbishop. Just the fact that he experienced the worst form of racism and fought against it, and his ultimate thesis coming out of that was, we need to forgive, and that actually kept the nation from becoming a terror, war zone, bloodbath, dystopia.
Okay, so I think I'm starting to understand what it is. First of all, apparently the last poll won, corrupt me in city won. The choices were between destroy the child or corrupt the child, Alex Jones style. Tall and Grim, though, redeemed an Ara Ara, you fucking monster. Thank you very much for that. And okay, so aside from the hydrate that I have to do here in a second, I think what's going on here is, while they've not defined wokeness, it feels like their definition will necessarily be one that can't forgive, one that, like, requires revenge or something. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, I'm going into this completely blind, but that seems to be what it is. So the idea of being, quote, woke necessarily means that somebody would not forgive. Again, I'm not gonna hold to that definition because one hasn't been granted, and we're only a fifth of the way through the video, sorry. But I guess we'll see. We'll continue.
Is something to take note of, and that's what we learned a lot about during high school. So that was
Jamie Lynn Turner, thank you very much for redeeming an oh well. Oh well.
Embedded in me from the beginning. Like, from the time I kind of started learning about Nelson Mandela to the time that I was in college, I began to, things were fine. BLM really wasn't a thing at the time. Life was good. To me, America was one of the friendliest countries I've ever been to. But then college was like, it taught critical theory. It taught critical race theory. When it came to like sociology and stuff like that, it was dark. The trouble is when you look...
Yeah, because when you actually look at America from a sociological perspective, you have to take into account that for the vast majority of our country's lifetime, we have had either slavery or we have had laws that have stigmatized or thoroughly disenfranchised minority groups. Like, there are people alive today that experienced Jim Crow. There are people alive today that have experienced having to deal with being racially profiled. Like, this stuff exists. From a sociological perspective, America has a racism problem. When you look at statistics for amount of people that have been killed by the police, you find that people of color are largely overrepresented in there. And I know that there's like a certain cringe factor to me, a white guy, explaining this to, you know, a female person of color. Like, I get that. I'm sure there's going to be somebody who's going to be super big-brained and point that out in the comment section below. But when I hear that, like, oh, it was all very dark when I looked at this through sociology, yeah, America has a pretty dark history. That's not exactly news.
Learn from that lens. And that's really kind of what some classes took. It wasn't like, oh, this is a theory, or this is a school of thought. It was, this is how you have to look at life. Like, these are the tools, and that's it. Like,
okay, so critical theory and sociology are different things. Critical theory is a way to, like, try to bring about economic change. Sociology is a soft science, which is why sociology likely is not going to go in and say, well, here's a school of thought on the idea. Sociology is going to go, no, this is our understanding of the idea. If you want to hear about various schools of thought, likely you need to go take a class in politics, or you need to go take a class in informal logic, or you need to go take something on various philosophies. That is where you'll get multiple schools of thought that are currently accepted. But if you are talking about a soft science or a hard science, you are likely going to get, no. Here is our concrete understanding of things insofar as we have been able to figure things out. That's how soft and hard sciences work.
This is actually what reality is. I had that framework kind of begin to get embedded in me, but pay attention to the feeling. I didn't feel good about it. Like, I remember the one day it was raining outside, it was almost Halloween, I think it was like 2014, and we were learning about symbolism. We're learning about Antonio Gramsci, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, and the hegemony, and I just felt dark. Like, I literally felt like my heart was opening, and like darkness was coming inside.
Yeah, so this is like when somebody deconverts from religion and they go through their angry atheist phase, right? You have that moment of you don't think God exists, but you've unironically become a mesotheist of sorts. You hate God, you hate the idea of God, you hate everything, and you fight against it, you rebel against it, you feel like you've been lied to your entire time. That sounds like that creeping darkness that comes in, like the feeling that you have come away from a lie, and now like the soft, comfy lie has faded away and only darkness remains. Like, that's a thing that a lot of people experience with other like shifts in paradigm or shifts in ideology. That's not uncommon. What I tend to argue is that even if, like, let's say you've got somebody who they look at the history of class conflict and they come to the position that, like, yeah, the world is terrible and the bourgeoisie largely have, you know, a critical hold on all factors of your life. There's not a factor of your life that has not been influenced in some way by a marketing team. And it feels so horrible to, like, realize that until you realize that you don't have to look at it that way. You don't have to sit there and go, actually, everything in my life has been a lie and it's horrible. You can actually go, wait, no, I still enjoy portions of my life. I still enjoy things I do, things I eat, people I hang out with. Like, what you do once you've been fed critical information is just as important as the veracity of the information.
From that moment, it was dark. As I adopted that lens through college, like, my outlook of the world was dark and hopeless. Little did I know my outlook of the world would then come back to affect my look and the way I saw myself, who I was, the value that I brought, how people saw me, all just deteriorated because it was like I had to take all these factors into consideration.
So wait, the idea that you had to take in multiple factors into consideration when doing things suddenly darkened your world? That sounds like you just became an adult and like you learned things about the world and you had to then consider them, and that was inconvenient. Maybe I'm misframing, but continue.
I came out of college with that worldview. I came out of college thinking like, as a Black woman, opportunities for me are so much less likely to happen or be given because of my Blackness, that I was very much so hyper aware of microaggressions. I was very aware of just like the way the world is, the way you're taught that the world is. So it's like everything's working against you. Literally, like you walk out of the door and like everyone is conspiring against you. So whereas
So wait, it felt dark because you realized the system was rigged against you? I mean, yeah, that is a thing that happens, but it's largely what we do with that matters. Like, okay, take someone like me. I recognize the system is not rigged in my favor. YouTube as a platform is going to favor other channels over mine practically all the time. And even if I start to get big, then there will be other factors to consider. There will be people who hate me for what I'm doing as I'm doing better on YouTube. When I was working at various jobs, I was in a competition with everybody who I was working with. And that competition was, whether one of us was going to get promoted or even stay. Like, sometimes it wasn't whether or not you were going to be the best person on the line. Sometimes it was trying to be the second worst person as opposed to the worst person, because the worst person would be fired and replaced by somebody else. And hopefully you can outpace them as well. Like, yeah, it's dark when you start to realize what kind of a dog race you're in going into reality. But again, it's what you do with that stuff that matters. You can enter the world recognizing that everything is stacked against you and not come out of it as a negative Nancy. You can come out of that being a positive influence for people, being a positive influence despite the fact that those things are horrible. Like, do you think when I go and play Magic the Gathering at my local card shop that I'm talking about the socioeconomic status of the world and how things are rigged against us? No. One or two of the people there that watches my content will probably joke about it and just say, yeah, capitalism's the reason that your commander deck costs too much. And I'd be like, yeah, it literally influences the secondary market. Cool. That's as far as the conversation might go, though. And that conversation only happens because they know my channel exists, and we're poking fun of it. You can choose what you do with that information. You can choose to try to be just a positive influence to the handful of people you interact with in your life, instead of letting the soul-crushing weight of all of that information drain you of hope. Like, you can do those things. You can be a positive influence after that. So far, it just seems like your argument, and again, when we watch the whole video, maybe it will change, but at this point, it feels like your argument is just, I learned inconvenient things, and it made my outlook bleak, and I didn't like it.
From the beginning, I would just kind of walk down the street and say hi to people. If they didn't say hi back, I was like, whatever.
Also, yeah, Zeku, she doesn't seem outwardly malicious. I agree with that. Like, this person does not seem outwardly malicious. I disagree with the things she's saying, and I'm giving my disagreements here. But you'll notice that, like, the tone here is different than, like, the mocking tone that I'd go for dealing with somebody like Call for an Uprising. I don't know if this person's operating in good faith, but I don't have a reason to assume uncharitability right now.
It was like every look that I got was racist. It was just racist, and it was also racist sexist. Like, it was more than just one thing. It was like everything you are is everything someone else hates. Like, literally walk down to the store, and I'll not pay attention to all the people who walked by me and who were just normal. I would walk by, like, say 10 people, and if one person, like, gave me a bad look or they didn't move out of the way, like, they're walking, and then, like, it's like, oh, what do you do? And they just keep going. I interpreted that as, like, it's a microaggression, like, that is an act of racism. So
and it very likely it could be. It could be one of those things, just like a lot of the ways that people view me is negative because I'm, balding fat guy. Like, that happens. I'm never going to experience, outward racism where I live because I live in a majority white area. But everybody is going to experience those things at some point. If you understand that everybody is going to experience those things at some point, it's a lot easier to brush those things under the rug. Like, yeah, they happen, and yeah, they suck, and yeah, they're inconvenient. But you do get to have a modicum, not all the time, but a modicum of control of how you respond to those things.
Regardless of all the other interactions, I was fine. That one thing would ruin my day. Like, I remember I felt like I would have a dagger in my heart, but it wasn't just that. See, that's just going to the store. Now you have to go through the whole day, and if you ever get anything of someone treating you like crap, or if you ever get someone who like opens the door, right, for maybe their family, and then like you're a far way off and they don't open the door for you, like actions like that, I would interpret all of that as microaggressions against me. So
okay, and again, even if those things were or were not microaggressions, you still had the ability to choose whether or not that affected you for the rest of your day. Like, you can't control offense, right? Like, that's a primary response. You can't control that. But you do have a little bit of control over how much that affects you during the rest of your day. Like, somebody asked in chat earlier, like, how do you deal with the fact that the world sucks and you know, what do you do about it? And I just go, I compartmentalize it. There's parts of the world that suck. I can't do anything about it. So I put it in the part of my mind that says I can't do anything about it. And I concentrate on the things I can affect. I might be able to go, like, play Pokemon at, you know, the park, and there might be somebody there that finds a shiny Gibble, and we get to trade stuff, and that makes me super happy. Like, that could happen. Or I can go down to the card shop, and there might be somebody buying their first Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh deck there, and now they've got a game to play, and I'm teaching someone. Those are all positive things that I can look forward to, despite the negative things that happen in my life. They don't change my ideology fundamentally. But continue.
So that would make me so fragile that by the end of the day, I'm filled with so much darkness, I'm filled with so much anxiety, I'm filled with so much stress that I can't even, like, do my normal, like, work. Like, I can't live my life like that, right? Like, I can't live and actually work and give 100% of the task because I'm kind of under stress and duress. So yeah, that's what life was like. Like, honestly, like, that's what life was like when you are hyper aware of all these kind of critical theory notions and ideas.
Okay, so for somebody who might not have experienced this, let me explain this in a way, because I actually do agree with the hyper awareness thing. Let me explain this in terms of something like game design, right? Or in storytelling. We'll focus on game design, though. Let's say that you understand basic game design. So when somebody creates a video game and you're playing it, and there's a HUD, your heads-up display is covering a lot of the screen, you're hyper aware of how much of the screen that cuts off for you. Especially if you're playing an old game where HUD elements were a lot more visible, and the idea of, like, having minimalistic HUD design was not quite in vogue yet. Let's say you're playing something like a turn-based RPG, and you're playing an older one, right? So you're hyper aware of the fact that this is based off of old XML spreadsheet shit. This is based off of, like, literally just translating Dungeons & Dragons here. And you're constantly thinking about which ways you would improve this system, which ways you would make it better. Let's say you're playing a platformer and you fall off an edge really quickly because you decided to hit the jump button at what in most other platformers would be the proper time. But this platformer magically did not have ghosting, which is where your character can stand on thin air for a split second at the end of a ledge to accommodate for input lag on jumps. Stuff like this is stuff that you are hyper aware of if you have, like, studied game design at any level. However, if you let that affect your enjoyment of a game, at that point it kind of gets on you. A little bit. Yeah, you're hyper aware of all these design decisions, but it doesn't change the game you're playing. Nothing there actually fundamentally changed.
Especially, like, the neo-Marxism stuff, it's like, I don't really know what to do with this energy except protest. I remember I was super, like, bothered about, like, no justice, no peace in LA. Like, I wanted to do whatever I could to help. 2016, y'all, like, 2016, I was out. Like, I was out. When I heard like Trump was running and like, you know, CNN was saying everything that was wrong with Trump, I literally couldn't function. I couldn't pay attention in school. And when Trump got elected, like I literally couldn't hand in assignments that quarter. Like I had to ask for extensions for my time limit because I literally couldn't focus. I was like sick. I was literally sick.
Okay, but is that because so I'm going to go ahead and say that, like, because you seem to have engaged in a paradigm shift at some point on how much these things affect you, it would follow that you had the ability back then to paradigm shift where these things were concerned, like how much these things affected you. And maybe you didn't know. Maybe you didn't know how to engage in self-love, self-care. Like, taking time to yourself in a way that is healthy, turning off the news, and just sitting down and reading a good book. Maybe these were things that you couldn't do. But somebody in the chat noted earlier that it sounds like she came from a very toxic leftist community. I haven't gotten that impression yet. It sounds like what she's saying has nothing to do with the community so far, and more has to do with just knowing these things on an academic level plagued her. And I get it. It's like the angry atheist phase thing. But at some point you do have to come out of it. But I came out of the angry atheist thing without, like, ceasing being an atheist. I still was one when I was done. It seems like your version of escaping the cult of wokeness in giant quotation marks. Like, CuLt is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It seems like instead of learning how to properly compartmentalize this inconvenient information, you decided to just change your ideology completely? I don't know. I want to see the conclusion.
Depressed, I was stressed, I remember I'd cry. I would spend my entire night, almost like throughout the night, trying to block Ben Shapiro's account, like trying to get it reported. I would like report it to Twitter, like, can you please suspend Ben Shapiro? Why is he still on here?
That sounds like a very, very, like, inadequate usage of your time. This feels, again, this feels like you were improperly using your time here, and you now know that you could have used that time better.
I remember that so vividly, and this lady called Ann Coulter, I think. I don't remember. I don't even know who she is. I don't know what she does, but I was like, Anne has to be removed. She's killing me. And that was my life. Like, literally, that was my existence every day.
So I have to wonder if all of this came from learning about things like critical theory, because you blamed this on college. I'm not going to bring in potential toxic leftist communities here, though those do exist, because you haven't brought them up in the video. You have brought up that it was college that did this. You learned critical theory, you learned sociology, and it caused you to get like this. So my question is, from a sociological perspective, what happens from blocking Ben Shapiro's Twitter account? What changes in the status quo? Fundamentally, not a whole lot. He'll still have influence on a variety of platforms. He'll likely be able to magnify that influence by making a book called Cancelled or some shit like he normally would. Like, what will that fundamentally change in the status quo? Will blocking Ben Shapiro, a tool for the bourgeoisie right wing, will that stop the Koch brothers from funding shit like PragerU? No. Well, the Koch brother, yeah, R.I.P. Like, it's like you took the idea that society is rigged against you, which it is, and you decided to, instead of accepting that unfortunate fact as a part of reality that you have to wrestle with, you instead internalized it and made it part of your identity. You were the one that made this unhealthy for yourself. And again, I get that, like, from the beginning, there's not a way around that. In the beginning, we all have that phase where, like, we feel like the system sucks and it lied to us and all that other shit. But then we learn how to operate in it. We learn how to adapt. We learn, ideally, to affect the things we can and compartmentalize the things we can't. And when an opportunity comes along where we can do something that was previously in that compartment where we couldn't do anything about, then we do something about it. As an example, ages ago, if one of my friends said that, hey, you know, I'm about to be homeless, I couldn't do anything about it for the most part. Like, I was, in many cases, battling homelessness. I lived out of a car with Raz for a decent bit of time. Like, there were times where I couldn't affect these things, but now, in some cases, I can go, hey, do you need to borrow a couple bucks to, like, make it through the week? Is that a thing you need to do? Because if so, I can probably help. In some very rare cases when I have a little bit of money available. That is not a thing I was able to do before. I previously had to compartmentalize any help of that variety in its own little bucket, else it would affect me and drag me down. And then my situation changed a little bit. And there are some situations where I don't have to compartmentalize that. And I can do something about it. But it feels really weird that, like, this is... Like, a lack of ability to properly compartmentalize is the problem? Let's see. There's only 5 minutes left.
It wasn't until it got too much. It literally wasn't until, like, it got too much that I couldn't function that I was like, I have to do something about it. It's like, I have all these knives of, like, people not opening doors for me, people not looking at me well, people not saying the thing that they should have said, people saying the wrong thing. I mean, just, like, getting looks was enough to trigger me for the day. And I was at a point where I was literally like, I'm a Christian, and I just had to be like, Lord, what do I do with this? Like, I feel horrible. I'm not at peace. Like, I am not at peace. And he was literally like, you have to forgive them. My word is very clear about offense. Don't be offended. The Bible literally is like, don't be offended.
Okay, we don't actually have that option. Psychologically, you actually don't have a choice on whether or not something offends you. Now, what you do with that offense is important. If somebody says to me that they would like to kill all of my friends, that offends me. It's going to. I don't have an option there. My moral structure does not allow for that. I take offense to them wanting to kill all of my friends. But what I do about that is important. Usually when someone says that, oh, you're offended, they're not upset that you were offended. They're upset at how that offense was manifested. And then they criticize the fact that you were offended, which, let's be honest, you don't really have much control over. That base psychological response is not something you choose. When somebody tries to give you that whole, like, well, you took offense to that, you chose to, that's literally just them playing a language game with you. You can't choose to be offended, but you can choose what you do with it. So in the example of somebody saying that they wanted to kill all of my friends, which I have had happen, I've had call for an uprising on here. When something like that happens, I can choose, do I yell and screech and get angry? Or do I sit down and go, well, why do you want to do that? And force them into the uncomfortable position of explaining that point. Like, you can't control that base emotion, but you can control what you do about it. And oftentimes people are criticizing what you do with that. But they hide behind saying, you're offended, you're offended, you're offended. Look at you, you little snowflake. When a lot of times the things that people are offended about could be, like, very legitimate things to be offended about. But anyway, continue.
And that doesn't mean that no one should offend you. That just means that if someone offends you, don't take that offense to heart.
Okay, so don't take that offense. She did change it. Don't take the offense to heart is maybe a little more okay, but there are some things that people can't, like, actually not take to heart. If 10 people tell me to kill myself in one day, I'm probably not going to take it to heart. But if everybody I interact with during a day tells me to kill myself, and it happens repeatedly over and over again, at what point is it my choice to not take it to heart anymore? At what point do those steel walls I've built around my cage I call a heart, at what point can I control those, falling down? You can't really argue at what point it can or can't happen, because we don't have any control over that particular thing. However, basing this in the Bible, if that's what you need to base it in, sure, but I don't like basing it on religious text. I'm sorry.
So I remember just sitting down with I think I had a notebook or a journal, and I just started writing. I just started writing all the names and everything anyone had ever done, because I remembered it all.
That is an incredibly unhealthy thing to do. Holy shit. Dude, if I told my therapist that I had done that, they would have given me a look like, and where did that get you? No. Don't make a list of everything bad that's ever happened to you. Jesus Christ. And none of this seems to have anything to do with critical theory or sociology. This is just you had bad habits in taking care of your own mental health.
I remembered everything every white person had ever done, a car ride, anything where they said anything. I held all of that here, guys.
Why? Why? What does that grant you? What do you gain from that?
And it was too much to the point I just had to write it. And I remember just that was the beginning of feeling peace, writing it down. So this is, if you're trying to find out how to have peace, hopefully somehow this video is giving that to you. Just begin to write down everything, and don't hold off race. Don't think race is this untouchable field, we're not gonna go there. No. If someone has offended you because of a racist act, write it down. And I remember writing it down and then just...
Okay, so if she's saying, I wrote it down in a way of, purging it from myself, that's more healthy? If you're writing it down to document it, that's not healthy. But if you're writing it down to, incinerate it afterwards as, a ritual of finality, that's fine.
Just being okay, I let this go. I let this go. I give it to you, God. I forgive them.
Also, Fox of Fate, thank you very much for the hada hada, you fucking monster.
I forgive them for all the things that they did. These are people that I actually still have relationships with today. They probably don't know how much hate and how much anger I had towards them for the things that they didn't even know they were doing. But in the moment of forgiveness, and this was a journey. This wasn't just one journal night. This was I had to do it over and over again. And if something resurfaced, I would be okay, I can't hold on to that. I want to hold the grudge, but I'm this is gonna break me apart. And I just journal it down. I just write it down. I write down what went wrong, and I would say you know what? This person could have had a bad day, and that is just as much as a possibility as it would have been that it was a racist act. I had to be open to those possibilities, otherwise I'd never let go of the grudge. And so I just did this over and over again, and it took about a year. Honestly, guys, it took a year to kind of go through all those incidents and journal it out and be you know what, I can't hold on to this. This is another one that I'm trying to keep forever and hold on to it for fuel, for fire.
Okay, so is the argument just I let go? Because the title of the video is that you escaped the cult of wokeness. The premise laid out in the beginning was that you had an ideological perspective based on the things you learned in college. And now it seems to be that you forgave a bunch of people for their microaggressions and you felt better. People can do that while maintaining their ideology just fine, so we've only got 2.5 minutes left. I'm waiting to see, where the escaping from the cult of wokeness happens.
But ultimately, guys, when I tell you now, I had so much peace, you guys, and I still have so much peace. And it actually isn't just about those incidents and forgetting them. I remember them vividly, but there's no pain attached to them. And I cannot tell you, I've never had this amount of control in my life emotionally, and in terms of like my psyche. Like, I feel so much peace from morning to sundown. So through that process of forgiveness, it's much more harder for me to take offense now, because I had to reject that whole mode of thinking. And I'm like, yo, I don't even want to play your woke game. That alone is adding such a burden to my life that I haven't been able to find or correlate in actual reality. Like, it is a burden that is optional.
Okay, so what is the woke game? You said the woke ideology, the woke game. I escaped the woke cult. But what is woke? What is wokeness? We have less than 2 minutes left of your video, and the critical piece of information that I need to even make like an assertion has not been defined.
Because it doesn't actually exist in real life. And since I let that go, I can sleep a full night's sleep and not toss and turn. I can look at Ben Shapiro and be like, yo, live your life, I don't really care. I can be like,
Okay, so there's a thing that seems to have happened here. You seem to have not ignored, but like, in forgiving people for the things that they do, you now seem to have come to a conclusion that it is more mentally healthy for you not to participate in the politicizing of issues. Like, not participate in the shit that goes on in the political sphere. And fine, if your mental health will not allow you to abide, like, all the shit that happens on this side of the internet, on this side of the world, completely understandable. I get that. Nobody should be forced to deal with political nonsense. But there's a thing that's happened, and you just laid it out. When Ben Shapiro is doing the things he's doing, if he's doing something that is largely harmful to those around him, or harmful to different people who might be important to you in your life, if your response to that is to just say, yo, you live your best life, then at that point, I think you've engaged in a failure. Because now you've distanced yourself so much from these things that affect real people in real reality, that if a real person was hurting another real person, you would simply not participate. And I think that's where I have issue. I think that forgiving is a healthy thing to do. Not holding on to the grudges of every bad thing a person's done to you, that's a healthy thing to do. I get that. But between not defining what wokeness is and now saying that, like, when Ben Shapiro does what he does, you would not intervene if you had the option? Now I start to have issue. Now, mind, please tailor this with the knowledge that I know that you used to try to, ban him from Twitter all the time, and that didn't work. Accept the fact that those tactics didn't work, and try to find other tactics that do. Like, say, pointing out that you might have a platform or a space where people who are hurt by things like Ben Shapiro can maybe go, where they're not going to have to deal with that kind of hateful rhetoric. These are things you can do. These are things you can affect. Instead, you seem to have taken the option of just distancing yourself altogether despite the harm caused by others. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that message. I really don't.
I'm gonna paint right now. Like, I literally have a painting right here. I can paint when I want. I am always at peace 24/7, yo. Like, this is why I really want my black brothers and sisters to consider forgiveness. And then maybe in your own time you can forgive, because it's like you're being robbed of your own peace, and guess what? You're the only life you're gonna live. You're not gonna like live another life. Like, the guarantee of that is never there. Right now.
Okay, so again, I agree with this message, but the framing as this escaping the cult of wokeness, all it seems to be is that there's one of two things that have happened. Either you've had a paradigm shift into a conservative mindset, and that's why you're able to ignore these things now, but you haven't argued that, or you've learned to engage in healthy coping mechanisms. Why is the name escaped the cult of wokeness? There's nothing about being... And even then, I was going to say there's nothing about being, quote, woke that means that you have to be an unhealthy individual. But I can't say that. Because without you providing a definition of wokeness, I can't even begin to throw anything into that category. It's nebulous.
Now your soul, your existence, your consciousness, it's only you. You're the only body you're gonna embody on this earth at this time. So ultimately, because of this, I couldn't hold on to wokeness anymore. Like, wokeness was literally crippling me. Literally crippling.
What was wokeness, though? What was it?
I couldn't see the gain in it in any way whatsoever. There was just no gain in being woke. And my lived experience can change, but then my lived experience gets challenged because it doesn't fit the narrative. There's just so many things I was like, this isn't worth it. I'm just gonna have my own life, and I'm gonna live my own life. I'm gonna be my own person. Like, I was done with it, and I'm done with it. Now I'm free. Like, I am so free.
Again, like, what did you actually escape? You had a paradigm shift. That's all that happened. Wokeness didn't factor in. Again, what even was wokeness at this point? Like, I'm not saying you have to be hyper-aware of all of the negative things in the world. Again, I'm happy that you found a healthy way to engage on this platform, or just in general. I'm perfectly okay with that. But I feel like when you say that wokeness didn't benefit you in any way, or didn't benefit anyone, like, it didn't help in any way, I hear a couple things. One, I hear a garble of nothing, because, again, you didn't define wokeness. I don't know what a cult is to you. I don't know what wokeness is to you. I don't know what these things are. I have to fill those blanks in myself. But it's when I fill those blanks in myself that a different narrative starts to form. And it feels like maybe the point was to have other people fill in their blanks for what wokeness is. Where it can be anything from being a liberal to being a triggered SJW, or being somebody who just wants societal change. Any of these things. They can look at your video and then distance themselves from doing any of these positive things because it's better for them as an individual just to participate within the system instead of arguing that the system is fundamentally broken, but it's broken by design and maybe we should fix it. Maybe we should do something about the system there. Instead of that, your argument seems to be to just break away from it at all and just live. And again, for some people, to have a healthy mindset, maybe that's the thing to do. But I feel like the message that everybody should break away from, again, from fill-in-the-blank wokeness, whatever wokeness means to you, feels like it's an argument against anybody who would try to do something to positively affect society. Like, mind, if you think society is broken, there are things you can do besides protesting. You have the ability to run for politics. You have the ability... I see that you're an artist. You have the ability to channel that energy into your art, to make those arguments with the brush, or the pen, or the pencil. Hell, if the person's stupid enough, you can make the argument with the crayons. It seems that your position was to break away from the knowledge that the world is broken when you had other options that you hadn't considered. Again, I think that I'm a fairly healthy person. Maybe not physically, but mentally. I suffer from depression, I suffer from anxiety, I might have ADHD, I don't know, I haven't gotten tested for it. I suffer from these things, but I also find myself in a positive mindset 99% of the time. And it's despite the people that I cover. If people who've been on my channel for years probably know that I used to be a lot angrier when I covered content. Just a lot angrier. And there are some videos that still make me legitimately angry. But I used to be a lot more angry and forceful when I did stuff. And I realized it was because I was letting that stuff affect me. But you know what didn't change? My perspective. That didn't change. I changed my approach. I changed the way I responded. But I didn't change my actual, like, ideals. Those pretty much remained as consistent as I can think they are, unless somebody can point out an inconsistency in the last 3.5 years. But we got 30 seconds left of the video. Let's go.
Robbing yourself of the best experience of your life, which is just being free deep down in your soul. That's all I have to say. That is how I escaped the cult of wokeness.
But again, what even is a cult of wokeness?
If you like this video, leave a comment below.
Oh, now you actually have videos like why I hate critical race theory. So, okay, so maybe stuff like this has more substance to it? This... If I were to TLDR this video, it would be... I learned unfortunate truths in college. I let them affect me negatively. I learned how to forgive people for their microaggressions against me. And that's how I escaped a cult that I never defined or never established. And I don't know how to actually feel about a video like this, because it doesn't feel like it's coming at me in bad faith. It doesn't feel like the person here means horribly. It feels, at least, I want to say it feels genuine, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know this person. I'm not familiar with their content. And I went into this video blind. So, I don't know. Maybe this is one of those things that I just need to let the audience decide. I need to let you guys figure out. We've been here for 52 minutes trying to discern what goes on in this video. And yeah, no, I don't know what to make of this, but I disagree with what I think the message is. The message that I think should come from something like this is I learned how to accept that there are very unfortunate and inconvenient truths in the world. And I learned how to coexist and operate within a world that contains those very unfortunate facts. I feel like that's the message that I maybe should have gotten out of this. Instead, I just kind of came out confused because there were things that just weren't defined. And I guess if you've got a largely conservative audience, they weren't defined on purpose, but that's me reading intent into your actions. And I don't think I can do that. I don't think that's a charitable thing to do. So I'll let the audience decide. You guys figure out what it is. You guys figure out what you make of this. With all that said, if you want to support my channel and what I do, please consider checking the description for links to Patreon and other ways to support the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Share with your friends if you haven't already. And also, follow on Twitch if you haven't done that already. As always, everyone, insert end video tagline here.